Hey folks, Michael Mann with Michael Mann Security Services, and welcome to Physical Security 101. Last week we talked about executive protection and providing close protection for your faith-based leaders or pastors. Today we're going to talk about your overall protection strategy. So if you're new to this and you're trying to develop a security ministry or some sort of a plan around how to provide church security, or you're existing and you're trying to improve operations, this is going to cover that very thing. All right. Hey, if you want to get a hold of me, you can get me at contact@michaelmannsecurityservice.com, or you can always call at 615-956-3912. I got a secondary email address here from the church, and that's at mmann@fbctn.org. And that's probably that, or the phone is the quickest way to get a hold of me. So if you've got questions, or if you've just got just concerns about anything that we talk about, please feel free to call us or contact us anytime. So let's talk about protection strategy today. So last week, in the close protection or executive protection presentation, we talked about the 4Ds. Those are your basic physical security functions, and they don't change. That doesn't change based on what type of person or facility we're protecting. We always have those. And you heard me talk about that last week. There's deterrence, there's detection, there's delay and denial, or what we would call response, and some other arenas. That does not change. We're always going to have those. What changes is strategy in our houses of worship. So there's a strategy modification, because the plan of action or our overall goal here is going to be very different in a house of worship. The physical protection program in any environment cannot conflict with the mission. And if we use a secular strategy in houses of worship, or even protecting faith-based leaders, it can conflict. And if it conflicts, one, it's not going to last very long. Two, there's going to be some unhappy folks. And then, of course, then your ministry's gone. So, or it could be. So we want to be very careful about what that strategy looks like. And we're going to talk about here in just a second what that means. Okay. All right. So generally, strategy in the secular world is very defensive. And what that means is it's very reactive. There's always a focus on response. This is a very specific Western type of mindset. It is how the world assesses threat. They look at everything very defensively and from the inside out. They look at things from the inside out. I'm inside protecting this. How do I protect these things from the outside? Okay. It is a action versus reaction type of strategy. Okay. So this is probably one of the most famous church security videos ever, because it shows an adversary attempting to attack a church, or who does attack a church. Several people are killed, and there is a very reactive response. Now, the threat was neutralized here. Don't get me wrong, but this is very reactive. Our physical protection program, and we're going to get into this in just a second, is designed to stop things from happening. This did not stop this from happening. The threat was neutralized, so there was a response, but there was no preventative measures here, or no one acted upon them. There's a story around this, and I've heard the person that neutralized this threat talk about it several times. So there were some preventative elements, but they weren't implemented or acted upon. So real quick, I'll show you this, and then we're going to move on because you've probably seen it. So the adversary gets up in just a second, and then there's deadly forces used, and then there is a response. And I'll get past this very quickly. I don't want to offend anybody by showing this video, but it just shows the point, the defensive piece, and I'll get into that in just a second. What does that mean to be defensive in nature? Yeah, so the idea was, we'll have a lot of people in there watching them, and we'll stop something from happening. That didn't stop it. That was defensive. That was reactive. Hey, good neutralization. Awesome. Still talking about it 4 or 5 years later, right? That happened like at 19, so almost 6 years later. But we got to prevent things, folks. That is what physical security is about. We are not police officers. We are protectors. And protectors think about and implement prevention. Your protection strategy should be preventative, stopping something from happening. That is what physical security is all about. And what I see in churches throughout the country, because I work with churches throughout the country, they have a law enforcement mindset. There's a former policeman or some guy that was in the military or gal, and they're very defensive. and guns and locking doors and spending a bunch of money on cameras. All that is very defensive or reactive in nature. That's where the money or the resources spent. And then it conflicts with what you guys are trying to do. And so we don't want to be defensive, right? We want to be proactive. We want to be preventative. We want to stop the threat from occurring. We want to assess security from the outside in. We want to look at this from the adversary's perspective, because what we're trying to do is impact the motivation of the attack. And we're using a biblical approach to security, which I'll talk about in just a second. Guys, here's the story of this. Yes, we're trying to keep the adversaries out, but they're not really active. I mean, they're active shooters. There could be terrorist attacks. That is a secondary classification of the adversary, the intentional threats we're trying to protect the church from. We're just trying to protect the church from sin. And that happened, it started in Genesis 3. There was a pattern change when Adam and Eve sinned. And we get into that in our behavior threat detection training. And that's what we're trying to detect and prevent. This is just sin. And this continues into Genesis 4. It continues into Genesis 5. And even after the flood in Genesis 6, even when God started all over again, he killed everyone, drowned everyone but the 8 people, right? And he started all over. He still says that the hearts of men are what? They are still evil and deceptive. And if we don't believe that, just go what Paul teaches about that very specifically in Romans 3. And we're taking our strategy is taking examples and taking lessons learned from the Bible, not from the world. Okay? So here we talk about preventative. It is effective because the goal is protection. It reduces your overall risk. What we're trying to do is see this early so we prevent the shooting. We stop it from happening. We're psychologically impacting the motivation, right? So we reduce the overall risk to our responders, to the church, the insurance company. We are reducing the risk, which is what our job is. It is cost effective. This is a cost effective strategy. And we can prove our return on investment because of value added services. We're not just providing security, we're doing multiple other things. Okay? Guys, we do this through behavior threat detection training. And what behavior threat detection training gets into is it's 2 modules. It's a total of 8 hours, 2 4-hour modules. Anybody can do this. I'm doing this at a lot of churches now, and I've not had any negative feedback. The churches, to include the pastors and all the stakeholders, love the training because it provides multiple elements. So we take a biblical approach to providing effective security strategy. We teach you how to do it. We show you how to prove or validate and communicate your return on investment. We teach you how to involve other ministries in this. We provide you with a strategy of how to provide value-added services. We teach you the layered approach, observation, reporting, and risk mitigation. We're going to show you what the warning signs are and the threat indicators and how to validate those perceived threats through engagement. And this is in a way that fits in with the mission of the church. This is the preventative strategy. So last week, executive protection or close protection. This week, what does a preventative strategy look like? If you have any questions, folks, you can give me a contact at michaelmannsecurityservices.com, or you can also get me an mmann at fbctn.org. You can always call me at 615-956-3912. Call me, ask me a question about services or about this strategy. And always remember, it is about prevention, not response.